Now, in full disclosure, Madam Speaker, while I do own Bitcoin, I'm not advocating for anyone to buy it, but for everyone to study it, progressives in particular, because after all, Bitcoin was born in the midst of the great financial crisis as an alternative to big banks' greed and the system that never failed to bail them out. It stands for a truly progressive ideal. So today, Madam Speaker, let me thank Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that may be, and wish a happy 15th anniversary to Bitcoin's white paper. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Sarah, a mother of 4 from Whitehorse, told me yesterday how expensive life has gotten because of a carbon tax. Sarah spent $240 to fill up her truck last Friday. That tank of gas will only last her 1 week going back and forth to work along with some kids' activities. That's $1,000 a month. Sarah also said her food bill is up 30% and is now forced to spend $1,300 to $1,400 per month as carbon tax has doubled transportation costs. From local Yukon MLA Stacey Hazard yesterday, Yukon has the highest cost of living in Canada. Quote, tell the federal government about the impact of the federal carbon tax on the cost of living here in Yukon. And the North has been more affected by the carbon tax than any other region in the country. Meanwhile, today, the Minister for Northern Affairs denied he'd heard any concerns from Northerners about the unfair carbon tax stunt. My question is to the Liberal Member of Parliament for Yukon. Will he stand up to this Northern Affairs out-of-touch minister and demand that the carbon tax be permanently removed for all Yukoners?
Yeah.
The honourable member for Kitchener.
Mr. Speaker, over the weekend, I had the honour of attending the Kindred Radiant Ladies' Night organized by the Coalition of Muslim Women. October is Islamic History Awareness Month, and this event was a platform for raising funds in support of the Coalition's vital advocacy work and their services dedicated to assisting victims of gender-based violence, discrimination, hate, and Islamophobia in our community. As we bid farewell to Islamic History Month, which celebrates its theme this year as Celebrating Muslim Women in the Arts and Sciences, we are reminded to appreciate the significant contributions of Muslim women throughout history and in Canada. They have left a lasting impact on the fields of arts, sciences, and society. As we move beyond Canadian Islamic History Month, let us continue to actively engage with and celebrate the rich history and culture within our diverse Muslim communities. Thank you.
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was a school principal, and so I have a great deal of respect for workers who work in education, coaching students, encouraging them to excel, to believe in their strengths and in their abilities. This could not be more important. So today, I would like to pay tribute to Constable Jessica Bonneville of the Town of St. Eustache's Police Department. She has been awarded the National Youth Justice Policing Award. Her exemplary dedication to the community, we respect her enormously. She has been involved also as a police officer educator in the Toucher le Sommet, Reach for the Stars project. She has encouraged many students experiencing difficulties to persevere and reach new heights. Jessica Bonneville is not only a source of inspiration to her students, but also to all of us in this House. To Jessica, thank you and congratulations. The Honourable Member for Argenteuil, La Petite Nation.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is critically important to acknowledge and celebrate the cultural wealth of our rural regions. It is an important vector of social and economic development. That's why, today, I would like to congratulate Yann Proux and Danny Monette of Production Les Deux Vallées for their excellent work. They are starting their 3rd season. These passionate men are very dedicated. They have worked tirelessly to make Canadian and Quebecois culture shine in Argenteuil, La Petite Nation, in La Chute, and in Papineauville and elsewhere. They offer our people amazing shows, really high quality, right in our towns where we live. So I thank them from the bottom of my heart for their important contributions to making our regions thrive culturally. Thank you, and keep up the great work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, food insecurity is on the rise everywhere in Canada currently. In Quebec, 1 in 10 people use food banks on a regular basis due to a lack of money. The problem now affects working people with modest incomes, single mothers, and people with high mortgage costs. Thousands of volunteers support our food banks across the country. We owe them our gratitude and our thanks. But now, our society needs to do more and be more generous. We all need to take a hard look at how lucky we are to be able to support a friend, a neighbor, or a family member. Let's rise to this challenge together. Let's share, let's show empathy, let's be civic-minded, and let's care for one another. Today and tomorrow, what could be better than sharing a good meal with your loved ones? Let's all be generous towards those who reach out to us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for Lévis-Lotbinière.
Malprononciation.
I apologize for having mispronounced his writing name. The Honourable Member for Humber River Black Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this year, my family and I, along with my riding of Humber River Black Creek, lost a close friend in Sam Rousseau, the husband of Louise Rousseau. Sam is survived by Louise and their children. Sam was always a vital member of our community and played an integral role in supporting Louise's advocacy against violence and gun control after being shot in a random shooting. Last Saturday, friends and family of Sam held a memorial in his honor, presenting a bench, plaque, and planting a tree in Louise Rousseau Park. Sam was a wonderful person and friend. I will always remember him for his kind heart, dedicated spirit, and infectious smile. He will truly be missed by all. On behalf of my husband Sam, my family and staff, I send my sincerest condolences to my friend Louise, their children, their family, and all who had the pleasure of knowing him. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nepean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had a meeting with over 60 Ottawa-based Afghan Canadian community leaders to listen to them and to discuss the issues affecting their community. Everyone expressed their condolences for those who lost their lives due to the earthquake in Herat province and recognized the significant impact it had on the affected communities and requested more Canadian humanitarian aid to them. They expressed grave concern on the degradation of the fundamental human rights of women and girls, from right to education to work. All speakers conveyed their concern for the Afghan nationals currently in Pakistan who have no legal status and today's deadline for them to leave that country back to Afghanistan. They also expressed concern that Afghanistan would again become a safe haven for the global jihadi groups. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I could ask members for their attention. I'm certain we all would like to listen to the different declarations by members, especially the member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
Hear, 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 hear. Yeah. The Liberals continue to double down on what Canadians already know. Their agenda isn't about helping all Canadians. It's about holding on to power and keeping their seats.
That's right.
This Prime Minister came out admitting his carbon tax is punishing Canadians and making life unaffordable. That's right. His solution? Temporarily removing a small portion of the carbon tax just in Atlantic Canada. The Liberal minister from Newfoundland and Labrador said on national news the decision was based solely on votes.
Unreal.
Political science, not real science. She said only people who vote Liberal matter. Another Liberal minister said he's sick and tired of people talking about the cold winter. Heating your home during a Canadian winter is not a luxury.
That's right.
The common sense Conservative promise is simple: fair and equal treatment for all Canadians. We will end all of the inflationary causing carbon tax.
Here, here. Yeah.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, the 2023 Poppy campaign is in full swing, and it is a way to remember and honour Canadian veterans. No one better embodies the heart of the Poppy campaign than the Dion family in St. John's. Rod Dion was a veteran of the Second World War and was part of the Normandy D-Day invasion. He passed away this summer at the age of 102 and was involved in the Poppy campaign for 50 years, right up until he was 101. Now his daughter Jen is carrying that legacy and tradition forward in his and other veterans' honor. A poppy is a way of saying thank you to those who served, like Mr. Dion, and I know it's a sentiment that everyone in this House shares. Least we forget.
All right. Then I have
the honourable member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this government, the cost of living is skyrocketing. People just can't buy anymore. Instead of giving people a break, this government, with its bloc allies who support the drastic imposition of a second carbon tax that adds 17 cents to the price of a litre of gas, it's costing a lot of money to vote bloc. And unlike what bloc MPs are trying to make people believe, this second tax does apply in Quebec. But last week, the Prime Minister finally admitted that his carbon tax is hurting people and making life unaffordable, Mr. Speaker. He gave the Atlantic provinces a break. One Liberal minister even said that the Atlantic got this break because they vote for the government. Mr. Speaker, it's appalling. This is an affront to Quebecers who are also suffering from the impacts of the carbon tax. The Prime Minister needs to show some fairness, some common sense, and drop his costly carbon tax for good, not just temporarily, and for everyone, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 miserable years, it's clear that the Prime Minister and this Liberal NDP coalition aren't worth the cost. A desperate Prime Minister in total freefall finally admitted that his carbon tax is punishing Canadians and making life unaffordable. Shame. But this weekend, the Minister for Rural Economic Development admitted this exemption wasn't granted to Canadians across the country because they don't vote Liberal. Meanwhile, today, the Minister of Northern Affairs denied that he'd heard any concerns from his constituents about their unfair carbon tax stunt, which I don't believe for a second. Mr. Speaker, perhaps I can help the member for St. Boniface St. Vital, because I have spoken to Manitobans. I've talked to seniors, families, and small business owners who despise the carbon tax and want it axed. The minister had a chance to stand up for Manitobans and remove the carbon tax from our home heating. Instead, his government is creating 2 classes of citizens, those who pay the carbon tax on home heating and those who don't. Will the Manitoban Liberal Minister for Northern Affairs stand up for his constituents and all Manitobans and finally axe the tax?
The honourable member for Davenport.
Today, nearly 1,000 patients are in need of life-saving stem cell transplants.
But less than a quarter of patients find a compatible donor among their family members. The rest rely on volunteer donors who aren't family members to save their lives. Patients are more likely to find a compatible donor within their own ethnic group. That's why it's so important for our stem cell registry to become as diverse as our country is.
Tomorrow, Wednesday, November the 1st, Canadian Blood Services will host the Hope on the Hill event from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., where parliamentarians, staff, and the Hill community will have the opportunity to join the stem cell registry in person. For those who cannot make it, I encourage you to visit blood.ca to discover how you can join the stem cells registry and save lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Vancouver East.
New Democrats condemn the Hamas terrorist attack on innocent children, women, and the elderly. Now, people who have nothing to do with Hamas are getting killed. Right at the outset, New Democrats call for a ceasefire, the release of all hostages, the protection of all civilians, and an end to the siege and bombardment of Gaza, and for humanitarian aid to reach civilians urgently and without restriction. We condemn all acts of anti-Semitism, anti-Palestinian racism, and Islamophobia. xenophobia, including any glorification or cause for the killing of innocent people, Israeli or Palestinian. As the siege and bombardment continue, a whole population could be wiped out. Humanity must be at the forefront of this war, any war. We must support ICC investigations into all war crimes. Canada must end the arms sales to Israel and condemn settler attacks in the West Bank. We must invest in building a just peace for Palestinians and Israelis and put an end to the occupation.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to commend the many years of dedication and loyal service of Jean-Luc Barthe, who has been the mayor of the municipality of Saint-Ignace-de Noyeau-la. Municipal government means being close to the people. To remain mayor for a long time, you have to be close to people. He had a career in Bombardier and in the marine industry. First, he was municipal councillor for 21 years, and now he's been mayor for 14 years, for a grand total of 35 years of public service. His exceptional involvement in our community deserves to be commended in this place. Mr. Barthe, I'm very proud to congratulate you for your hard work, your perseverance, and your strong sense of responsibility. You have been loyal and you have worked nobly. Your dedication to your region, which you hold so dear, deserves the utmost respect. Congratulations.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 8 years, rampant corruption and gross mismanagement of taxpayer dollars is being exposed at the Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund at Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. A friend of the Prime Minister, who is chair of the board, has funneled millions of dollars to her company and even had executives pressure and mislead staff into approving millions more. Recent reports reveal that of a small sample of companies that received funding, 3 of them were ineligible, but they still received a staggering $53 million. The companies didn't need the funding. The external reviewers recommended against funding them, but they got tens of millions of taxpayer dollars anyway. Because under this NDP Liberal government, insiders get paid and Canadians pay the price. Conservatives have alerted Canada's Auditor General to the corruption at the Liberal Green Slush Fund and have called for a full forensic audit. Canadians deserve answers because this Prime Minister, well, he's just not worth the cost.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Fleetwood Port Kelsey.
Mr. Speaker, last week in member statements and question period, Conservatives made 179 statements they knew were not accurate or factual. Now, you can put this down to political hyperbole, but link it to other things Conservatives have been doing, and a dark picture emerges. Since they named their latest leader, Conservatives have consistently worked to tear down Canada's democratic institutions, government agencies, the CBC.
I'm going to interrupt the member from Port Moody, Fort Kells, to indicate that any honourable member in this House deliberately made false statements is against the rules of the House. If the member is able to, I will encourage the member to start his statement again, but understanding what I've just said, and would conduct himself accordingly. The honourable member from Port Moody, Fort Kells, from the top in an amended fashion.
Last week in member statements and question period, there were 179 statements that were not accurate or factual. You can put this down to political hyperbole on the part of the Conservatives, but link it to other things that Conservatives have been doing, and you get a very dark picture. Since they named their latest leader, Conservatives have consistently worked to tear down Canada's democratic institutions, government agencies, the CBC, to diss our economy and attack our courts, and to disrespect the Speaker as well. Everything is broken, promotes distrust. They feed the public a steady diet of anger and doubt. Is this a setup? to create citizens' willingness to elect a strong man who'll take away some of their freedoms in exchange for an illusionary sense of protection? Is this the Conservative leader's agenda? If so, risky and reckless. If not, then he should follow the advice from Cicero. When some speak ill of you, live so that none would believe them.
Order. À l'ordre. Colleagues, once again, I will encourage you to please reread my statement that I made from the chair almost 2 weeks ago now in regarding trying to bring more decorum to this House. It's really important, not only for ourselves, but for all Canadians to understand that we understand that each member of Parliament who comes here with the best of intention to serving her or his country, to do so with honor and to do so with integrity. There are statements which we can make, which can certainly reflect a point of view that people have, but let us make sure that we do not cross over that line into calling into question the dignity and honor of all members. The honourable member, questions orales, l'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The honourable leader of the opposition. The Prime Minister's flip-flop with regards to carbon tax causes issues with Canadians because there are now two categories, those that are temporarily exempted and those who will have to pay the second carbon tax as applicable to Quebec. It will continue to increase the price of gas, diesel and food for Quebecers.
Minister of Rural Affairs said that Prairie Canadians are going to have to continue to pay the carbon tax because they didn't vote Liberal. Will he denounce her divisive comments or admit that he's hitting Canadians with higher taxes as punishment for not voting for him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, there are people throughout the country who are facing very high prices because they heat their houses with oil. They don't always have the choice to switch to better options like heat pumps. This decision focuses on switching to heat pumps, which is good throughout the country. We're here to work with all provinces who want to make sure that low-income households receive heat pumps for free so that they may finally put an end to their dependency on oil, which is more polluting, more expensive, and that doesn't help families at the end of the day. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Flip-flop on the carbon tax for oil heating proved everything he said for 8 years about the tax is wrong. It's not worth the cost. He said that the tax would make people better off. He's now admitted that that's not true. He said it's about the environment, but he leaves the tax on lower emitting and more environmentally friendly natural gas, and now he's dividing Canadians based on where they live. So will he stop creating two classes of Canadians? Will he take the tax off all so Canadians can keep the heat on?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the goal from the very beginning of our fight against climate change and the price on pollution was to put more money in people's pockets and encourage protecting the planet. And that's exactly what we've seen over the past number of years. As a step, one of the things we are targeting right now is home heating oil, which is used right across the country, primarily by lower income residences, and they pay more for home heating oil than you do for natural gas, and it's dirtier and more emitting than natural gas. So we are going to provide free heat pumps for low-income families in provinces that are willing to participate with us and drive down emissions.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Admits that he's keeping the tax on cleaner and lower emitting natural gas. This is clearly not about environmental science, it's about political science. And that political science with him is always divide and conquer. Tear the country apart to serve his own narrow personal interest? Does he not realize that what he is doing is not just bankrupting Canadian households, 14% of whom are living with unsafe temperatures because of higher energy costs, but he's actually tearing our national unity apart.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we see from the Conservatives yet again is misinformation. The price on pollution applied to natural gas does put more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians across the country. That is what the Leader of the Opposition refuses to recognize. When Canadians receive a climate action incentive check, that more than compensates for 8 out of 10 households across the country than what they spend on carbon price with natural gas. It doesn't apply that way. That math doesn't apply on home heating, which is why we're phasing out home heating oil by replacing them with free heat pumps for low-income Canadians.
The Leader of the Opposition.
That he continues to contradict the parliamentary budget officer who said that 60% of Canadians pay more in his carbon tax than they get back in the rebates. What now he's doing is contradicting what he said on Thursday, wherein he admitted that Canadians are made worse off on a net basis by his tax. That's why he's having to put a pause until after the election. Already, 14% of Canadians are living with unsafe temperatures in their homes. 1 in 10 have missed a heating bill in the last 12 months. Will he, before people go cold and hungry, axe the tax so that people can keep the heat on?
Home heating oil is more expensive, more emitting, more polluting, and is in households that on general are lower income and don't have the means to support it. That's why we're putting forward a program that is going to give free heat pumps installed right across the country as long as the provinces step up and partner with us the way 3 provinces already have. We know the best way to support families is to have them save thousands of dollars a year on heating. That's what they're going to be able to do with a heat pump. That's why we're delivering it right across the country as provinces step up.
I'd like to thank, before I pass on to the honourable member from the opposition, I'd like to thank the whips for signalling to their members to try to keep the noise down. I'd ask all members to please take a look at their whips and to make sure to follow their example. The honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So he admits that natural gas is cleaner and lower emitting, and that's exactly why he's going to penalize Canadians for using it. Mr. Speaker, he says he wants to bring in a pause for some people in some places. I want to get rid of the tax for all people in all places and forever. But wait, why don't we let Canadians decide? Why doesn't the Prime Minister pause the tax across the country until Canadians go to the polls so we can have a carbon tax election and Canadians can choose his plan to quadruple the tax or my plan to axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is amazing to me that after 3 failed elections in a row by the Conservatives, they still want to fight another election on denying climate change, on denying the costs of climate change. After the summer we've had, they continue to say no plan against climate change is what's good for Canadians, good for our economy, good for businesses. They are wrong, and Canadians are going to show them that once again.
Again, I'd like to thank the whips for encouraging members to please to be able to exercise some amount of self-control, especially when we're listening to somebody providing an answer. The Right Honourable Prime Minister still has 15 seconds on the clock. I'll let him continue.
Mr. Speaker, in homes across the country that heat with natural gas, the carbon price delivers more, the carbon rebate delivers more than the carbon price costs in 8 out of 10 homes across the country. That is why and how we are fighting climate change and putting more money back in people's pockets. With home heating oil that is dirty, more expensive, we're phasing it out and replacing it with free heat pumps if the provinces sign up.
The Honourable Member for Bailey-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister for the Environment published certain guidelines, but made no announcements, no new announcements for immigration targets. He will announce them tomorrow, but he's almost admitted that he did not know what they were going to be. So does he know today the numbers that he will announce tomorrow? That's worrying. This isn't a last-minute university essay. He needs to consult before he decides to choose a date upon which he will make his announcements. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know that immigration is a strength for Canada, for its economy and for its diversity and for our communities from coast to coast to coast. We shall continue to welcome people from throughout the world, and we'll continue to do so and always do so in a responsible way, taking into account the needs of our businesses and our families and our communities, but also the needs of the world. We'll continue to do so in a responsible way, and I'm looking forward to seeing tomorrow's announcement. The Honourable Member for Bailey-Chambly. I'm afraid that I don't know more than that. We're debating a motion on successful immigration that would ask the immigration minister to consult Quebec, provinces and territories, which is a healthy approach for everything, in order to establish targets for 2024. Could we harbour hope that were the House to adopt the motion, the minister will not announce a target tomorrow, because he can't reach targets before he consults provinces and territories? This would be a gesture of goodwill. It would be a responsible thing to do, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we completely agree that we need to consult provinces, we have to work with municipalities, we need to consult various groups of Canadians to have good targets, and that is exactly what we have done for the past years. We work hand in hand with provinces, we work hand in hand with organizations, we work hand in hand with municipalities to set good targets for our country, and we'll continue to do so. This is a very reasonable proposal, and we will support the Bloc's motion today. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The Prime Minister's own cabinet minister already admitted that this Liberal government only wants to help people that vote for them. We already have a climate denier Conservative leader who pretends to help people. Now we've got an out-of-touch Prime Minister who only acts when it's in his own interest. New Democrats have proposed taking the GST off of all home heating, a measure that would help all Canadians. When will the Prime Minister stop dividing the country and put in place a measure that gives relief to all Canadians?
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
Mr. Speaker, a number of years ago, we made the decision to phase out coal because it was dirty and inefficient in how it powered our country. We are now making the decision to phase out home heating oil because it is more expensive, because it is more polluting, and because it is disproportionately relied upon by lower-income Canadians who need extra support. That's why we have created a program that 3 provinces have already bought in on and agreed to replace and give free home heat pumps to low-income Canadians across the country. We look forward to having more provinces sign up and deliver heat pumps to Canadians who need it.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The Prime Minister is delivering a program that divides the country. L'annonce sur le chauffage domestique.
The announcement on home heating is cynic and divisive. We have a disconnected Prime Minister who just wants to help regions where they are losing popularity. And we also have a Conservative leader who denies the existence of climate change. The NDP has asked for a very long time that the GST be removed for home heating to help all Canadians. Will the Prime Minister finally do this? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the member across the way knows full well that there are Canadians who use home oil heating throughout the country. In our program that will be applicable from coast to coast to coast, we'll be here to help them to make a change towards a more efficient, a less expensive, and a better for the environment heat pump. We are here to work with provinces. We are here to deliver heat pumps for free for Canadians, low-income Canadians. We'll be here to fight against climate change. We'll be here to help families in order to build a better future for all.
After 8 years, the Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. He's desperate and in total freefall. So he announced a gimmicky plan to give a temporary pause to just some families in mostly Liberal-held ridings. Now, the senior Liberal Minister for Newfoundland is proud that this exemption only applies in her region. She even called out Liberals from other parts of the country for not protecting their communities. The Minister for Prairie Development is a Liberal Member of Parliament from Manitoba. It gets cold in Manitoba. So why was he so useless in protecting Canadian families in his area?
L'honorable Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we discussed in the House yesterday, the focus of this program is enabling affordability, getting people off of heating oil, which is more than double on average the cost of natural gas in this country. It is about reducing carbon emissions at the same time. It is an important step forward for climate. It is an important step forward in terms of addressing a key affordability issue, and certainly it is good public policy.
The carbon tax is a complete failure. It drives costs up, hasn't allowed the government to hit their own emissions targets, and now the Bank of Canada confirms that the carbon tax alone is responsible for 16% of the extra inflation plaguing Canadians. And now with this announcement, families who heat their homes with clean Canadian natural gas will be punished just for living in areas where the Prime Minister is massively unpopular. He once said a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. So will he stop his divisive tactics and take the carbon tax off of home heating for all Canadians, Mr. Speaker?
L'honorable Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said before, the focus going forward is ensuring affordability and addressing climate change. The honourable member is entitled to his opinions, but he's not entitled to make up his own facts. At the end of the day, 80% of people in this country get more money back in a rebate than they actually pay in terms of the carbon price. This is a program that is focused very much on addressing both climate change and affordability. It is something that my honourable colleague across the way would not understand because they simply don't have a plan to address climate change at all.
L'honorable député de Simcoe Nord.
Mr. Speaker, this government's recent announcement is a comedy in the making. The Liberals said that they could not deviate from their carbon tax plan. They said that extreme weather, hurricanes, floods, and fires demanded that they quadruple the carbon tax. They challenged anybody. They said anybody who challenged it was a Luddite. They said people get more in rebates than they pay, except last week they said when they pause the tax, it's actually making life more affordable. Canadians are realizing this Prime Minister's not worth the cost. So why won't they just cut the tax on all forms of home heating for everybody this winter?
L'honorable Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind this House that before we came into power in 2015, emissions projection by 2030 were going to be 80 million tons above our 2005 levels. We've now brought this down to 50 million tons below our 2005 levels. That's the equivalent of removing from our roads 20 million gas-powered vehicles, Mr. Speaker. We have the best record in the G7 for reducing greenhouse gas emissions over the last few years, and we will continue to work for Canadians to fight climate change and help with affordability.
L'honorable député de Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, as inflation continues to remain, Canadians are realizing the Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and the Bank of Canada is concerned that the soft landing that it once projected is now much narrower. That's because economic uncertainty is increasing while inflation still hasn't been tamed. Two things the government could do to help the Bank of Canada tame inflation is cancel the carbon tax and reduce its spending. So why is the government not taking these two very simple ways to make the Bank of Canada's job harder to bring inflation down for Canadians?
Here, here.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, it's wonderful to hear the Conservatives quoting the Governor of the Bank of Canada, someone that they wanted to fire a few months ago. But it's surprising and it's wonderful because if we actually listen to what the Governor of the Bank of Canada said, he said that carbon pricing was contributing 0.15% to inflation and that cutting carbon tax would have no long-term effect on inflation and no effect past that 1 year. So if the Conservatives are serious about helping Canadians, let's get supportive of what this government is doing to increase affordability and stop peddling whatever it is that they're trying to peddle.
I'm sure that everyone would love to hear the question from the Honourable Member from Mégantic-l'Érable. You have the floor. Last week, the Liberal Prime Minister looked at the polls and panicked. After 8 years, he realised that the common-sense Conservatives were right to say that the carbon tax was creating inflation and increasing the cost of absolutely everything. Once again, the Liberal Prime Minister has completely forgotten Quebecers who are also racked by the stress of not being able to feed their families. We know that the Bloc Québécois wants to radically increase the carbon tax, but that's certainly not what Quebecers chose. It's expensive to vote for the Bloc. Does the Prime Minister understand that he's simply not worth the cost? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what surprises a lot of people in this House and those who are watching us at home is that a party that wants to be government has absolutely no plan to fight climate change, no plan to adapt. Yesterday in La Presse, we heard that floods in Quebec this summer cost our farmers and producers $150 million. That's a direct impact of climate change. The Conservatives want to make polluting free. They want to make the climate crisis even worse, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Do you know what's even more shocking, Mr. Speaker, is that after 8 years, every month, 1 in 10 Quebecers used food banks in 2023. After 8 years of this Liberal regime, the Bloc wants to continue to punish the middle class by radically increasing the inflationary carbon tax, and the Liberals are picking and choosing who will see their bill reduced according to the colour they voted for. This is unacceptable, divisive and unfair to Quebec families. Will the Prime Minister finally understand that he is not worth the cost and announce the complete and permanent withdrawal of the second carbon tax, which will punish Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what is shocking is that there are at least 4 members of the Quebec Conservatives who in the past voted for carbon pricing. And today, the weather vane has shifted because the wind of the leader has changed to be against climate change. And so they want to do nothing to help Canadians fight against the impacts of climate change and to reduce our pollution, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, in the Toronto Star, we read that Ottawa will establish its immigration levels based on provinces' intake capacity with healthcare, housing and infrastructure. So they have to consult Quebec before announcing new immigration thresholds. But on the 4th of October, Christine Fréchette, Quebec Immigration Minister, said that the federal government had ignored Quebec's intake capacity, so Quebec had not been consulted. Can the minister publish documentations saying that Quebec has actually been consulted? The Honourable Minister for Immigration. Once again, the Bloc Québécois refuses to understand. The Quebec-Canada agreement has existed since 1991, so it's as old as the Bloc Québécois. But mysteriously, they forget how it works. Quebec has its word to say, Canada has its word to say. We are in constant communication with Quebec and other provinces. We set our thresholds, we respect our jurisdictions, but the Bloc Québécois seems to forget and ignore what the issue is. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, consultation is a thing that happens with two people. Tomorrow, there will be new thresholds announced by the government. In the media, they said that they would take into account intake capacity for healthcare, education, infrastructure. They also said that they would vote for the Bloc Québécois motion that adds education and francization as two factors to be taken into account. As far as we know, they don't know Quebec's intake capacity. Will they delay and finally consult Quebec and provinces? The Honourable Minister for Immigration. What is clear is that when we evaluate various pillars and thresholds, Quebec's intake capacity and Canada's intake capacity are taken into account. Consultation doesn't happen between two people, it happens between 13 people. We need to talk about this with the country as a whole. We need to understand immigration. We must understand that it's the future of our country. So I invite the Bloc to see what we will propose. Quebec knows it already. They've been consulted, and they've been consulted constantly. The Honourable Member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, the Minister has announced that tomorrow he intends to do two contradictory things. On the one hand, he announced that he would vote in favour of our motion asking him to consult Quebec before adjusting his immigration thresholds according to our capacity to receive immigrants. And then there's a contradiction. He is going to announce immigration thresholds for 2026 without having consulted Quebec at all and without having the slightest idea of our intake capacity with regards to healthcare, education, francization and infrastructure. He will vote for one thing, then vote for the opposite the very same day. Why not consult Quebec before announcing thresholds? The Honourable Minister. I'll repeat this once again because I don't think the Blocistes are listening. One, consultations are underway. Two, people, they're very frustrated because we're voting for their motion.
The Honourable Member from Lambton, Kent.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, a desperate Prime Minister is in total free fall, and he has admitted that his carbon tax is punishing Canadians. The Prime Minister has announced his re-election platform. Vote Liberals to increase the carbon tax on your home heating, gas, and groceries. Even the Minister from Long Range Mountains admitted that the exemption wasn't given to all Canadians because they didn't vote Liberal. What about the Liberal MPs from London? Why are Liberals so incompetent and so ineffective at getting an exemption on home heating for folks who are struggling in Ontario?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, thank you very much. I thank my honourable colleague for the question. Mr. Speaker, this government has always taken a regional approach, whether it's to economic development, whether it's to our climate plan. And Mr. Speaker, let's just be very clear, whether it's billions of dollars in St. Thomas, Ontario, for Volkswagen to set up and have batteries and be able to support the supply chain for Canada, Mr. Speaker, price on pollution is a market mechanism that is the best market mechanism we have. It's producing results unlike anything the Conservatives could actually put on the table. It's putting more money in the pockets of the middle class, Mr. Speaker, and it's reducing emissions.
The Honourable Member from Lambton, Kent.
Mr. Speaker, this government is living in a fantasy land. The Liberals have finally said the quiet part out loud and have admitted that all Canadians are not equal to them. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are struggling to pay their bills. The gimmicks that the government is offering is not going to help families who are stressing over how they're going to afford to heat their homes this winter. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So will the Liberals listen to the Leader of the Opposition and introduce legislation today to axe the tax on all forms of home heating for all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard words like gimmicky and various kinds of things coming from the other side of the House. I would tell you that the person who actually has heating oil in their home will save upwards of $2,500 per year. It is an enormously important affordability measure. We are going to ensure that we are addressing affordability while we are concurrently fighting climate change. It is a shame in this House that we still have a political party in this country that does not believe in the reality of climate change. It doesn't exist in any other G7 country around the world. It's appalling, and Canadians should be shocked at that.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Liberal Prime Minister gave Atlantic provinces a gift by reducing the carbon tax temporarily. But Quebecers and the rest of Canada must continue to pay for it. I read that some families have had to cut back on their spending recently just to get by, while still they're having to change their habits just to survive. Today, on Halloween, Bloc Québécois MPs have dressed up as Liberals and are dipping into Quebecers' wallets. Will this time-worn government extend its plans to Quebecers and the rest of Canada and stop dividing our country? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's rather ironic to hear this member speaking up against the carbon tax because he worked for a government, the Jean Charest government at the time, who was seen as a champion in North America in the fight against climate change. Arnold Schwarzenegger said that Jean Charest was the best premier of a province or state when it comes to fighting climate change, and the honourable member was part of that government. He voted for that measure, and now the weather vane has shifted just because there's a leader who is against fighting climate change. I find that unacceptable, Mr. Speaker.
I imagine that all members want to hear the question and the answer. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know what they think of this minister. It's more costly for Quebecers to have voted for the Bloc because they want to add a second tax to the tax so that Quebecers pay even more. They've stated loud and clear here in the House that the government should increase yet again, more drastically, the carbon tax. Will the government hear reason and be more reasonable than the Bloc and extend the reduction of the carbon tax to Quebecers and all Canadians? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister. What's drastic, Mr. Speaker, is that my colleague from Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier came with me to Baie Saint Paul in July to observe the how the public there was affected by climate change. And so their official policy still in 2023 for the Conservatives is that climate change does not exist. And yet we have a policy that is their policy is pro-pollution and doesn't help Canadians. The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
I asked the Minister of Immigration if he would expedite existing immigration applications to help get families out of Gaza. He said he had instructed his officials to be as flexible as possible. Yet Global Affairs is outright telling people only immediate family members are eligible, parents and siblings are excluded. Clearly, the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. Will the Minister of Immigration officially commit to expediting existing immigration applications and include extended family members?
The Honourable Minister.
What is happening in Gaza is absolutely catastrophic. And it is one of the worst places to live on earth right now. Now, we'll be putting pressure on all parties Israel, making sure that we do so working also with Egypt, working with Qatar, who's speaking to Hamas, and making sure that our Canadians are coming back home and brought to safety. Thank you.
Great job.
The honourable member from Hamilton Centre.
This Liberal government is all talk and no action when it comes to protecting the rights of workers. In the past, they've used back-to-work legislation to force workers off of the picket line, and now they're dragging their feet on introducing our NDP anti-scab legislation. Meanwhile, the Canadian Olympic Committee has just hired a company that has locked out their employees, and Canada Post has just produced a non-union commercial with a union-busting company. So, trick or treat, Mr. Speaker, will the minister finally do the right thing for workers and commit to bringing in our NDP anti-scab legislation today?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we're making sure that collective bargaining process is as free and fair as it can be. We've wrapped up consultations. We're going to take feedback that we receive from unions, employers, and Indigenous groups to inform legislation which will be tabled by the end of this year. This is the latest evolution in policy to protect the collective bargaining process. We need to strike a balance between doing it quickly and getting it right. Thank you.
The honourable member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, is our student program. In Brampton, I know many of them have come to my constituency office and asked for help. They become victim of fraud. Unscrupulous consultants have taken advantage of them. Mr. Speaker, this is not right. We have to protect the integrity of our program. What are we doing to combat fraud and protect the victims?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member of Brampton South for her question and her advocacy in particular. Our goal really in this announcement that we made on Friday is to punish bad actors without punishing the good actors that are having a welcome home for international students in this country. These people are a real credit to our country, and we want to make sure that we are properly accompanying to them. What we announced on Friday is making sure that we are verifying that the letters that are issued by designated learning institutes are properly verified so that we nip fraud in the butt, but also making sure that we're moving towards a recognized institution model to make sure that we are really ensuring that those institutions are actually doing their jobs and making sure that student experience is comprehensive. Thank you.
Honourable member from Coastal Bay Central and Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister finds himself rapidly falling out of favour with Atlantic Canadians. They're not stunned. They know he's not worth the cost. With a short 3-year reprieve from Carbon Tax 1, Carbon Tax 2 is still cleverly buried in oil bills. Why is this government misleading Atlantic Canadians about removing carbon tax when Carbon Tax 2 remains? And how much will they pay if they vote Liberal again?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, as I've said a number of times in this House, the focus is on addressing affordability challenges, particularly as they relate to heating oil. Heating oil is by far the most expensive way to heat your home. The investment in heat pumps will actually save people significant amounts of money, but it will do so in a manner that will continue the battle against climate change, a battle that is an existential threat to the future of the human race, is an existential threat to the future of our children. It is a shame that the political party offside over there has no plan nor any belief in the reality of climate change.
The honourable member for Coastal Bays.
Looking across at the member from Avalon, I can tell by the look on his face that that answer is just not good enough. Those that heat their homes with oil think they received a treat. But if they vote Liberal again, they're going to find out that it's a trick. As an Atlantic Canadian, I ask, will the Prime Minister stop dividing the country and remove all carbon tax from all forms of heating fuel for all Canadians and give them a goodie this Halloween?
The Honourable Minister.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. this government adopts thoughtful approaches to public policy. We are addressing affordability concerns in a manner that is consistent with fighting climate change. But the honourable member, I am amazed, is somebody who actually is opposing one of the greatest economic opportunities of our time in Newfoundland and Labrador, supported by the province, developed by the province, developed by companies in Newfoundland and Labrador to ensure that they develop an offshore wind industry and a hydrogen industry that's going to create jobs and economic opportunity in his riding and in ridings throughout the province.
The honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Speaker, last Thursday, the Prime Minister admitted two things. One, that his carbon tax is making life unaffordable for Atlantic Canadians. That's right. Two, that if re-elected, he will impose the full quadrupled carbon tax on Atlantic Canadians, regardless if they can afford it or not. After 8 years, Atlantic Canadians can't trust or afford these Liberals, and the Prime Minister's not worth the cost. When will this Prime Minister quit playing games, axe the carbon tax permanently so that every Canadian can keep the heat on?
Good question. L'honorable ministre.
The honourable minister.
Speaker, you know what? In this House, one thing is clear. What is clear is the Conservative Party actually has no belief in the reality of climate change and no plan to fight it. This government actually is focused on ensuring we are addressing affordability challenges in a thoughtful way while concurrently addressing the climate issue. It is a shame in this House, it is a shame in this country that we have a political party that denies the reality of climate change and is willing to give up the future of our children.
The honourable member for Tobic-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, our desperate Prime Minister, while in total freefall, is now trying to fool Atlantic Canadians by pushing the quadrupling of the carbon tax till just after the next election. It's clear now more than ever that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost, and after 8 years, everything is more expensive. The government should listen to Premier Higgs of New Brunswick when he told them that they should just cancel their unaffordable carbon tax altogether. Will this NDP Liberal government finally listen, get off the backs of Canadians, and axe the tax for all Canadians from sea to sea?
L'honorable ministre.
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, and through you, I would certainly suggest to my honourable colleague that perhaps he talk to his constituents about the $2,500 a year that they will save through the installation of a heat pump, that they are going to be able to do that in a manner that will enhance the affordability for their family, but also do so in a manner where they can assist in the fight against climate change. As I said before, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives in other G7 countries around the world marvel at the fact that in Canada we still have a political party that questions the reality of climate change and has no plan to fight it.
The honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, small businesses are not asking the federal government for much. They just want it to be flexible by pushing back the reimbursement of the CEBA debt without losing their grants. Mr. Speaker, we're not talking about multinationals here. It's where your daughter works at the corner restaurant, or it's business people at home in our ridings who are working hard to create employment in their region. It could be a future Bombardier. The government is patient and generous with American multinationals, so why is it not being flexible with our small businesses? The honourable minister. Mr. Speaker, our government listens to small business, and the qualification for the exemption was in 2022. The small businesses asked for our help, and that is why our government extended the deadline of eligibility until January 18th, 2024. We have also announced an extension, a full extension of this date until the end of 2026. Thank you. The The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, it's a double standard here in Ottawa with regard to the needs of big oil and those of small business. Neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives are challenging the $83 billion in subsidies to the oil patch over the past two budgets. According to them, that's responsible. But giving an extra year to the local small businesses to pay down their pandemic debts, for them, that's just too much. Mr. Speaker, when will this government get its priorities straight and postpone the payment of CEBA? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to correct what my colleague just said, because Canada is the first G7 country to have eliminated subsidies on fossil fuels 2 years sooner than our 2025 deadline. And we went even further because we also eliminated public support for fossil fuels, and no other G20 country has done that. We're the first. The Honourable Member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
The carbon tax has made life unaffordable for Canadians, proving what we already knew. After 8 years, Canadians know this desperate NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. On top of this, a member of this Liberal cabinet let the veil slip and admitted that people living in Eastern Ontario were denied an exemption on heating oil because they voted the wrong way. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if my neighbour, the member from Kingston, the Islands, shares the sentiment and can explain why the Liberals are refusing to cut the tax on all forms of home heating to all Canadians.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to a recent study by the Public Policy Forum, offshore wind could be for Atlantic Canada what oil was to Texas or hydropower to Quebec. This is monumental, as the study quotes. The region could supply 6.5 million average homes, so twice the electricity currently consumed in Atlantic Canada. I guess many Canadians are wondering why are Conservatives standing in the way of clean energy power that would benefit all Atlantic Canadians and Canadians across the country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Regina Louvain.
After 8 long years, a desperate Prime Minister in freefall has finally admitted his NDP Liberal carbon tax punishes some Canadians more than others. The Prime Minister set his election platform recently. He said, if you vote Liberal, you'll increase taxes on gas, groceries and home heating after the next election. Canadians know this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. In Saskatchewan, it gets pretty cold outside. We use 90% natural gas to heat our homes. It's greener and cleaner, but we don't get the exemption. Will this NDP Liberal government finally listen to our leader and axe a tax for all Canadians?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage my honourable colleague to do a little bit more reading. Home heating oil is 2 to 3 times as expensive as natural gas. It is imperative that we actually enable people to implement heat pumps to be more affordable, to ensure that they actually can save the $2,500 a year and do so in a manner that is consistent with fighting climate change. But, Mr. Speaker, we also have programs to encourage the displacement of natural gas-fired furnaces through the Greener Homes program, through the Greener Loans program, and to see the implementation of heat pumps. And certainly folks in Saskatchewan, where I grew up, are very, very, very much able to access those programs.
Heat pumps don't work in Saskatchewan.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Speaker, with his government in free fall, the Prime Minister dropped his tax on home heating, but only for certain voters. After 8 years, all Canadians are feeling the pain and know that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. His minister then admitted this exemption wasn't granted to all Canadians because they don't vote Liberal. What about the Liberal member from Calgary Skyview or the minister from Edmonton Centre? Just 1 year ago, these Alberta MPs voted to keep the tax on home heating. Is the Prime Minister ignoring his Alberta colleagues, or do they agree that Albertans should be taxed more for heating their homes than other Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague from Calgary for his question. We have always worked to respond to regional needs as a government. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. We put billions of dollars in the last budget for carbon capture, use and storage that predominantly will go to Alberta and Saskatchewan. We have put flexibility in our clean electricity regulations on exemption, Mr. Speaker, that will take us out to 2035 burning natural gas. Mr. Speaker, if the Premier of Alberta and the Premier of Saskatchewan want to scope this in, they can join us and help low-income Canadians to get heat pumps and get off of heating oil.
The Honourable Member for Laval-les-Îles. Mr. Speaker, my riding of Laval-les-Îles has the largest Armenian community here in Canada. Many of my fellow citizens are very concerned by the humanitarian crisis, further to recent military activity on the part of Azerbaijan. How will the new Canadian embassy in Yerevan, opened by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, contribute to improving relations between Canada and Armenia, as well as resolving the conflict in the long term? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his important question. Yes, I have just come back from Armenia, where we opened for the first time a Canadian embassy in Armenia. And I think, yes, it's good news for everyone. And I'd like to say that we have also I joined the EU mission that monitors the border to ensure greater safety and stability in South Caucasus. The leadership on the part of Canada is how we do diplomacy, and I will talk about this tomorrow in Montreal. The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are hurting more than ever before. And this government's solution is actually to divide our country by picking winners and losers. For some Canadians, they'll save $1 on the carbon tax with regards to their home heating because, of course, it'll be temporarily paused. But for those in Alberta, they're not given the same benefit. They'll continue to pay the carbon tax. The Minister of Labour and Seniors had this to say. He said, "This is purely an affordability issue." Direct quote. Conservatives believe that that is true. It is an affordability issue for all Canadians, not just some. And so can the Minister for Labour and Seniors tell me why the seniors in my community don't deserve the same break as the seniors in his community?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for the question. Let's look at the facts. Child poverty in this country cut in half thanks to the Canada Child Benefit, which the Conservatives, how do they vote, Mr. Speaker? They voted against. An affordable childcare system that is saving Alberta families up to $10,000 a year and creating 65,000 new spaces. How did the Conservatives campaign, Mr. Speaker? Against. Mr. Speaker, a pipeline to Tidewater. And what did the Conservatives do as we were getting TMX ready to be built? They argued against. Mr. Speaker, we're here for Canadians. We're here for Albertans. We're going to make sure that our climate plan works. They can argue against. We're here for Canadians every step of the way.
Not even your side light ship.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
After 8 years, this desperate NDP Liberal Prime Minister in total freefall finally admitted his carbon tax is punishing Canadians and making life unaffordable. But today we heard from the Minister for Prairies and Northern Development that he's never heard pushback against his party's carbon tax. Well, I have news for that minister. Canadians from every corner of the country have been desperate for someone to listen to their plight. Will that minister admit that that Prime Minister is not worth the cost and join Conservatives in supporting our call to axe the carbon tax on all home heating?
The Honourable Minister.
Conservatives like to talk about axes, and it's clear that they've been working with the Premier of Alberta, because what does she want to do? She wants to axe renewables. She wants to axe low electricity rates in Alberta by doing a 6-month moratorium that's cost us already $12 billion in investment and $30 billion more probably leaving our province. Mr. Speaker, they want to slash supports for students and seniors and working class Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And you know what the icing on the top of the cake is, Mr. Speaker? They want to pull Albertans out of the CPP. Shame on them. We're going to move forward on climate change and protect Albertan pensioners.
Oh, my God. Before we move on to the honourable member for questions, I'd like to remind all honourable members, please, to not intervene while the floor is being occupied by somebody else. I know I don't have a clear view of what happens in the latter half of the aisle, but I can hear the voices of certain members, perhaps, and I would just ask members to please try to listen to their whips so that we can hear their questions.
The honourable member for Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska-Rivière, Zulu. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this government, Quebecers are fed up. Food bank use is at a record high, with 1 Quebecer out of 10 using them monthly. And this government, with the Bloc support, wants to worsen things with its carbon tax. It's not worth the cost to vote Bloc. The Prime Minister gave a break to the Atlantic provinces, but not to Quebecers. Will the Prime Minister announce the complete and not just temporary rollbacks of this second carbon tax on all Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for Climate Change and the Environment. Given the enthusiasm of at the questions, I was not able to answer the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier what they thought of my work as the Environment Minister. The representative of Greenpeace said that I was the best environment minister in the history of the country.
L'honorable député de Don Valley.
The honourable member for Don Valley East.
Mr. Speaker, the late Nelson Mandela once said, "Sport has the power to unite people in a way that little else does." A great example of this are the Pan Am and Para-Pan Am Games. Earlier this month, Team Canada began its 2023 Pan Am journey, and in a few weeks from now, it will begin its Para-Pan Am journey. I think I can say with confidence, Mr. Speaker, that all members of this House are proud of our Canadian athletes. Can the Minister please update this House on our athletes at the Pan Am Para-Pan Am Games?
The Honourable Minister.
I'd like to thank my friend and colleague from Don Valley East for his question. I was recently in Chile to support Team Canada. 470 Canadian athletes are participating in these games, with another 127 slated to compete at the Para-Pan Am Games in a couple of weeks. These include 3 athletes from my home riding of Delta. So far, Canada has won 105 medals and is on course to exceed its all-time medal count at these games. Thank you to all the athletes. Thank you to the coaches, to the parents, to the trainers, to everyone who makes it possible for these athletes to compete and succeed. On behalf of all Canadians, I'd like to wish our athletes well and say, go Canada, go.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
The cost of living is creating a crisis in northern communities, and the Liberals are making it worse. Federal employees rely on the subsidy to help them with their housing expenses, and the Liberals are trying to cut that subsidy, a move that will cost workers between $6,000 and $8,500 a year. This will force people out of their homes and cut services that Northerners rely on. Will the Liberals reverse this decision and stop punishing workers?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Thank the Honourable Member for that important question. And it's an important question. It's one that we're fully engaged in. I know I'm working with the Treasury Board. I'm working with the MPs from Nunavut, the MPs from Northwest Territories and Yukon on the question. And as soon as we get clarification, I will get back to the MP from Nunavut with the answer.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Speaker, it's no secret that Canada's in a housing crisis. We've heard from builders, bankers, economists, policy experts that significant public investment in housing is required in order to get out of this crisis. What does the finance minister say? What about what the Bank of Canada will do? What about the rating agencies? Well, good news. At the Finance Committee yesterday, the Governor of the Bank of Canada said that investments to increase housing supply in Canada would not be regarded as inflationary spending and might actually help bring down inflation. So the path is clear to replenish the co-investment fund, the Rapid Housing Initiative, and start a nonprofit acquisition fund. Is the government going to do it in the fall economic statement, or will they be missing in action?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I thank the colleague for the question, Mr. Speaker. The point on the acquisition fund is one that he and I have discussed in the past, and it does merit further consideration. But I also point to the various other programs, the other programs that are part of the National Housing Strategy that he mentions, the Rapid Housing Initiative, the National Co-Investment Fund. These programs combined, added to others, have lifted 70,000 people off the streets. They now have wraparound supports that help them make a transition towards something better. 122,000 people, Mr. Speaker, who are near homelessness are now housed because of this strategy. We have more work to do. We will do that work in cooperation with partners.
That brings us to an end of question period. I see that there are 2 points of orders. The first of which with the member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to correct the record. I misspoke during question period, and so in the interest of accuracy, I just want to make sure that my comments were accurate. I said that the Bank of Canada governor testified that the carbon tax added 16% of the extra inflation. It's actually 16% of total inflation and 33% of the extra inflation above target.
Appreciate the precision that is bordering, if not crossing into the line of debate.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, you often mention that we have to improve the House of Commons decorum. And so in answer to the second question from the honourable member for Saint-Jean, the Minister for Immigration said on the Bloc Québécois, there is an obstinate refusal to understand. This is non-parliamentary language, so I demand that the Minister retract his statement and that he offer an apology. I would like to thank the member for La Prairie for his intervention, and I would like to encourage there be decorum here in the House. I note that the Minister is not here. I appreciate my colleague's intervention. I will take it into consideration, and in due course, I will report upon it if pertinent to the House. I see that there is a point of order. The member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. Mr. Speaker, earlier during question period, I made a mistake, and I admit to my mistake. I asked the Minister for the Environment to ask a question to his old organisation, but it wasn't Greenpeace, it was Équiterre. I would like him to consult Équiterre so that we can know Équiterre's opinion on the Minister for the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. This seems to be more of a point of debate.